In this video, I'm going to be looking at Beelink computers. I got 3 of them. There we go. All different sort of specs. One's Intel, 2 AMD, 2 are like a little bit older by now. This one's pretty new. And the idea behind this video is that I'm going to be turning this one, because it's the most powerful and newest one, into a portable Plex Media Server. And by portable, I don't mean it's going to be battery operated, like I could just bring it with me wherever I go, like on a train or a bus or something. I guess I couldn't on a train because you could plug it in. Point being, while I'm on vacation, this way I could bring a whole bunch of media with me and have a nice interface, especially if I'm going on vacation with friends and, well, whatever. The point is, Plex Media Server will be going on this one, and it will have 16 terabytes of SSD storage. The SSDs cost more than the computer. I really should have gone with just 8 terabytes, like 2 4-terabyte drives, but I went nuts. And the only reason to be looking at these other 2 is to get an idea of Beelink's general design philosophy and overall quality, so I don't judge them on just one computer. And these 2 are eventually just going to become satellite routers, like VPN routers, to allow remote connectivity via a permanent VPN link to an off-site facility. When I say facility, I mean someone's house, but anyway, that's the point behind these 2. And that's why they're a little older and they were pretty cheap. And before we dive into these, I just want to point out, this is not sponsored. I bought all of these with my own money. Beelink has no idea who I am other than a random customer, and nor should they. So if I like them, I'll say I like them. If I don't like them, I'll say I don't like them. This one is an AMD Ryzen 9 6900HX, 32 gigs of RAM, and 500 gigs SSD, which obviously on this one will be replaced with these two 8 terabytes. For some reason, Western Digital / SanDisk 8 terabyte drives were cheaper than even like the no-name brands, but these are pretty well regarded SSDs in the grand scheme of things. So that's why I went with these. I didn't really need high performance for this purpose. I just needed a lot of storage. This one is a Ryzen 7 3750H, 16 gigs of RAM, 500 gig SSD. Way overkill for what this is going to be. And finally, this is an Intel, well, I guess 8279, 16 gigs, 500 gigs. And Beelink's model lines are not necessarily the best, but this is the EQ Series, SE lowercase I series, and SE uppercase R series, in a kind of Star Trek font almost, which seems wrong. And this font also seems wrong for other reasons. They did sort of up their packaging design a little bit, make it look a little more modern, but yeah. And I've never owned a Beelink PC before. The only reason I bought these is because Beelink seems to have a large range of products, and they've been around for a decent amount of time now. So my hope was they're going to be at least a bit of a step up from no-name, Alibaba type garbage, even though that's probably what they are without the branding. Super shiny on top. Actually, that's a pretty cool effect with the lights I have down here, to be honest. I actually kind of like that. It doesn't have RGB lighting built in, but you bring your own. And your own dust. So, Core i5 does have USB-C, which is nice. A couple of USB 3. And a clear CMOS. I feel like that's kind of a bad sign that that's right on the front of the device. Like, they're going to be really expecting you to use that a lot. Then around back, Ethernet port, USB, 2 HDMI, so it does support 2 monitors, external power supply. And here is that external power supply. It's a wall wart style. I don't like that. It just takes up like 2 sockets next to each other for absolutely no reason. I prefer one with an inline power cord, but hey, whatever. What's the specs on this? 19 volts, 3 amps. So, despite the fact it doesn't have like a standard laptop barrel plug, a lot of laptop power supplies are 19 volts, so you could just swap one of those out if it has the right style plug on the end. HDMI cable and a really short HDMI cable? Yeah. Yeah, it comes with a super short HDMI and a long one. I think the super short one is because it also, if I get it out of the bag, it also comes with this bracket, which I believe can be used via these 2 screw holes here to VESA mount it. Like, you can mount it right behind a monitor. Although not if you're using the VESA mounts for the monitor, because it doesn't have any kind of mounting holes on this side. But if you're using the monitor stand and it has VESA mounting holes, I think you can just screw it into those. And that would be the reason for the super short HDMI cable. And that was the SEi series, and this was the Intel. Now we'll take a look at the SER. And this one does proudly declare its AMD heritage both on the device itself and on a sticker. Well, 2 stickers. And this has Radeon graphics. I'm not sure if that's discrete graphics or this is just a Ryzen processor which has a built-in GPU, or an onboard GPU. Much the same as the Intel variant, the one with this shiny top. In fact, the front panel is almost exactly the same, and the size, form factor-wise, pretty much the same. Although the feet are different, so it's not just the same case in a different color with a different lid. And this one has this mesh lid, which I can kind of see through, so I'm guessing that's also for cooling. And then around back, we have the exact same ports and port configuration as the Intel version. Although for some reason this one doesn't have labels on it. Not that you need labels, it's kind of obvious what these ports are. It's just odd that there are differences, even though size-wise they're very much the same or similar. Oh, and by the way, no vent holes on the front. Both have vents on the sides to ingest air, I'm guessing, and then exhaust air through the holes in the back. Whereas this one might also might also intake some air on the top. So we'll open these both up in a minute and sort of see the difference. And then with that SER model, the AMD one, we also have a identical looking power supply, also 19 volts, 3 amps. We also have a VESA mounting bracket, looks exactly the same as the other one. A short HDMI cable and a long one, and the screws for the mounting bracket, which the other one did have too, I just didn't draw attention to them. And here they are. And this is the one I'm a bit more excited about. That didn't even cut through it. And this is the one that I'm a bit more excited about because it's a much more modern system, and this will be mine, my Plex system. So, similar sort of packaging to the other ones. It says hello, which you really need to get in the right light. Hello. Yeah. Which is a sticker, I believe. Weird. Oh, it's the EQR series. Wait. It just said EQ on the box, but I think it's EQR is the series name. And this one has, ooh, gray. Kind of like this color gray. A long HDMI cable. And by long, well, I should say how long they are. I'm going to say about 1 meter. And this one has a built-in power supply, so this just comes with a standard North American figure of 8 lead. Also in this fetching gray color. I don't know, black cables have just gotten so boring over time that I appreciate anything else. Whether it be white, gray, or any colorful sort of cable like I keep around here in the basement. But this is what we really want to see, and there we go. It's got this nice 3-dimensional textured pattern on top. On the front, we actually have one less USB port, or one fewer USB ports than the cheaper models. But hey, not terrible. But also we do have a headphone jack, and I guess this little hole is probably the clear CMOS hole, except not obviously labeled. And then around back, 3 USB ports. So I guess it makes up for the loss in a front USB port by relocating one to the back. 2 LAN ports, which is very cool. 2 HDMI, obviously, and the power input. And I'm kind of curious to see what the power supply looks like in this, because this is actually pretty light. So, almost too light for something that contains a power supply and a computer. And I kind of favored this for travel in a sense, because I don't have to bring a power brick with it. I just have to bring a standard power lead. But the advantage of it using a DC power supply is that if I wanted to use this in a car on a road trip, or on a train or something where I could plug it in to a battery bank or something, you know, 19 volts, that's close to USB-C 20 volts. So yeah, I could run this off a real chunky power bank if only it had DC input. So advantages and disadvantages. So I'm going to take a look at this one last, I guess, because that's when I'll put the SSDs in and get it configured. But for now, I just kind of wanted to compare these side by side because they are insanely similar, except AMD, Intel, and shiny, not shiny. Well, this part's shiny. Right away, I like this design kind of better because you can see the 4 screws on each of these. This one, the screws are under these little protective rubbery nubbins. What's that? What is that flap for? I don't know. And also, this one did not come with a VESA mounting capability. And it has its vent holes in the bottom, therefore it has to have feet. So I guess you can't flush mount this to anything. I mean, you can with the feet there, but you know what I mean. These have no vents on the back. And they are the small laptop-y type screws, and they do have thread lock on them, the blue kind. Okay, the gray one uses longer screws for some reason than the black one does. Even though the cases look very similar, they're not really identical, and I'll show you how they come apart in a second. I can see right now there's a seam here on this one, but not there on that one. Alright, so now this should just come off. Oh. And this one, though, is recessed, so I have to, like, pry at it? Oh, actually, I have an idea. It's got these two holes here. If I just throw a screw into one of those holes lightly, that should give me the leverage to take the back off. Yep, and it does. And there we go. And even though the cases are just a bit different, internally, very, very similar layouts. They both have a SATA hard drive enclosure there and there. And there are some differences between the motherboards, but like the SATA connector is the same on both of them. There's a BIOS battery here, but not here. I mean, obviously the chip layout's going to be a bit different because it's AMD versus Intel. They both allegedly have crucial RAM, which maybe it's genuine crucial, maybe it's not. This one has a Kingston SSD, and this one, an Intel... Oh, I didn't have to take that off, because it's labeled on the other side. An Intel SSD. Whether they're genuine parts or not, I don't know. The weird thing is, though, they both have these heatsink pads, right? Which seems great. It seems like a good design, except the heatsink pads interface with the hard drive enclosure. Now, this is metal, so it will sink the heat away, but it will sink the heat away into this metal that's fully enclosing a hard drive, or SSD, if you put a 2.5-inch SSD in here, and it'll just transfer the heat right into that. Not necessarily directly to the outside of the case, as would be preferred. So that's not great, but it's not horrible either. And of course, if you're not using an SSD or hard drive, as I won't be, then fine, it'll be sinking the heat right into this. Also, these heatsink pads aren't great in that they don't cover the full drive. Like this one's covering the controller chip, and it looks like there's a flash chip there, and then 4 flash chips there. So this would sink the heat away from 3 flash chips in the controller, but not these flash chips down here on the end. And kind of the same situation here, although this one, yeah, we got a couple of chips here and a couple of chips here. So again, it's really only sinking heat away from half the drive. Since I'm not going to be using these for, drive intensive, performance intensive tasks, I might just sacrifice this one and let this one be cooled better. I don't know. So first, I guess let's take a look at the SER model, the AMD one. I just want to pop the motherboard out and see what's underneath there. First, it's one of the lifty kinds. Where is it, one of the flippy kinds? Nope, it's one of the lifty kinds, where you gotta like lift up the black part of the connector, and then it should come out. Yep. Then we got a little fabric style grounding strap there going to the case, and another one covering these ports here. And what I like about these is they don't solder the SSDs or the RAM, so we got one 16 gig module right here, but it has room for 2 modules. Very nice that you can upgrade it. Let's just pop the SSD, and the SSD is actually held in with the exact same screw that the case was closed with, which is nice, so you don't have to worry about mixing up screws. Now the back, that's not, I don't think that's an Intel sticker on the back. It says AZW 512 gig. It does feel very light and flimsy. I know, like, obviously NVMe SSDs are very light in general, but this is like almost magically light. And then I'm hoping it's just taking out the 4 screws in the corners to get this to lift out. And these screws are once again the same. That's something I really like. It's a pet peeve of mine when a product seems to use like 50 different types of screws, like different thread pitches, different diameters. different, even different heads. Like you need Torx for some, Phillips for others, flat heads for yet more. These are all identical, and it just makes disassembly and assembly much easier and more intuitive. Yeah, and then that should just pull out. Does have a couple of wires going to the antennae for Wi-Fi. I don't remember if this has Bluetooth built in. It's an Intel dual band wireless AC, model number 7265. I'm just going to grab some snapshots of the labeling on these components so I could show them in the video, and you guys can have a better job of determining if they're real or not. Actually, you know what? Rather than messing those tiny connectors, if you bend those out of shape even a tiny bit, they will just never lock on again, and you've kind of ruined the... That's the same again. You've kind of ruined the connectors. So I'm just going to cheap out and just remove the Wi-Fi card, which is held on by some random glue. Interesting. So yeah, I'll just leave the Wi-Fi card there. And so, while it did have this translucent mesh, there's only a hole right down the middle, and that hole corresponds to the inside of this fan. And by the way, the power button fell out, which is a very soft rubber. Well, I shouldn't say the power button fell out. The button is of course still there, but the button cover fell out. So yeah, I mean, that's it. We got this heatsink and fan combo on top. The CPU is going to be underneath there, and yeah, it's just your basic, very tiny motherboard. But I have no complaints or problems with this. It's pretty good, actually, because, like I said, it's good that the Wi-Fi card, the SSD, and the RAM are all on connectors and not just soldered onto the board, which gives you a wide variety of alteration and upgrade paths for this. Presumably, you could put in like a cellular card there instead of a Wi-Fi card, or cellular/Wi-Fi, add a couple of antennae to this case, and you're good to go. And the antennae, by the way, are here on the top of it behind this. I would advise removing these stickers, because these stickers are metallized, they're metallic, so they might actually block some of your Wi-Fi signal. That seems kind of dumb. Yeah, and my wife just texted me to let me know we just had a magnitude 3 earthquake here, which may not sound like a lot to people from California or Japan, but it is a decent-sized earthquake for New York. I didn't feel it, though. She had to inform me of it, and she is away on vacation, which is why she didn't tell me to my face. But the earthquake was west of Manhattan, so I am east of Manhattan by a little bit, and therefore probably just didn't feel it, or didn't notice it. The last couple of earthquakes we had, which were a bit more intense than a 3.0, but not super intense, I think they were in the 4-point-something range, definitely felt those, but, you know, not enough to cause property damage, fortunately, or anything. But, you know, at first, it's like, what is that? Because we get maybe an earthquake every 7-8 years around here, so we're not exactly used to the feeling of them, so it's like things start shaking a little bit, and you're like, is that me? Am I feeling a little faint from last night? So this one has the ground strap, doesn't go to the case. But, oh, and it didn't even occur to me, the AMD, the case is actually metal. I don't know how I didn't notice that, because they both sort of look metallic, but this case is most definitely plastic. So I guess there's no point in having the ground strap go to the case. I just want to pull the antenna wires out. Actually, you know what, rather than risk it, why don't I just take the Wi-Fi card out. Actually, let me get a picture of this first. And this one's an AC7265, just like the other one. Oh, and this one they actually put goop on the connectors. You can see that black stuff there. So that they're kind of glued on. Can I get that out of the way so the board can move? What is... Oh, there we go. There we go. And here the two antennae are on the side of the case. So here's the front. The antennae are under here. And I think this whole top is just plastic, so you wouldn't get anything blocking the Wi-Fi signal. And this sticker appears to not be covering the antenna. And yeah, motherboard is, again, very similar. And same kind of squirrel cage fan. This one's got some copper heat sinks on it, or copper fins, and copper on the base plate too. This has probably a better quality heat sink, I'm guessing, because obviously copper's more expensive than aluminum, which I presume the other one's made out of. But yeah, otherwise incredibly similar. This one's got the CMOS battery there, which makes it ever so slightly more difficult to change because you'd have to take the board out, whereas this one, it's just sitting right on top. But otherwise, yeah, just fine. No major complaints. I wonder if these will fit in each other's cases. So this is the Intel. So will it fit in the AMD box? I mean, yeah. Yeah, all the ports seem to line up. Yeah, so the Intel one will fit in the AMD's case, and the Wi-Fi card and even the antenna leads reach, so that's fine. Not that I'm going to switch, and that's just going to get confusing because the labeling will be wrong, but yeah, very interchangeable. So I'm not sure why these cases are different, really. It doesn't seem to serve a purpose. Oh, and let me just get a picture of the labeling on these two, just to get an idea of if they're real or fake. I mean, it's nothing personal against Beelink. It's just on off-brand Chinese computers, I'm used to seeing off-brand SSDs and RAM. Oh yeah. Just have to remind myself this was the Intel, so I put it in the right case. Like I said, I don't think it matters from a functional perspective. It's just so the labeling's correct, and I remember which is which. Oh, but that's something lame I'm realizing about the Intel version. So the AMD one has a hole right here in front of the fan, or a mesh, a screen, so you can get airflow. This fan just sits against the back of the case, which has no ventilation, and then has to pull air from the sides. But you can see the problem with that when I put the motherboard in. Yeah, so when I put the motherboard back in, you can see the problem. There is hardly any clearance between the bottom of the motherboard is right, I would say, I could kind of see it through the holes right about there. So the problem is that fan is stuck under the motherboard. So the only air intake is really like this row of triangles and this row of triangles, but maybe only half of this row. And same on the other side. So, and I think when I said bottom, I meant top. Sorry about that. But the point is, no vent holes. So you have a really very small airflow path for the air intake. On this one, you have ventilation on the sides as well as the top. So I think the AMD one is a bit better designed. Now, that might be because that AMD processor puts out more heat. And so that might be a design necessity rather than, you know, an aesthetic choice or any other kind of design choice. Yeah, just kind of a shame that they didn't add another vent hole on this and they just went for the looks of this flashy surface. Which again, I like the flashy surface. It's just I do like function over form when that function is essential. Oh. Almost closed the whole thing up without actually screwing the motherboard back on. And there we go. I do like the easy assembly and disassembly of these. And another thing I'm realizing about the thermal design here is that, okay, so the SSD is sinking its heat into the case, sort of, but there's no airflow on this side of the case whatsoever. So the air is just kind of getting trapped in there. Oh, whoops, I was supposed to, I forgot. One minor order of operations issue is that I was supposed to route that SATA cable under the SSD, or under the NVMe SSD. I mean, I guess technically I didn't have to. If this second thermal pad wasn't there, the cable would have sat comfortably over the SSD. But I'm doubling up on this one because, I don't know. Oh wait, actually, it was trapped on top of this thermal pad before. I just realized that, because that thermal pad's got a dent in it. So I'm going to try not to trap it. But I can kind of see how that would happen. Yeah, it kind of wants to fold that way. Yeah, see, as you close the case, that cable wants to fold inwards and on top of the SSD. So can I sort of, and it doesn't really have anywhere else to go. Alright, well, screw it. If that's how the manufacturer liked it, it's fine. Well, no, you know why I don't like that, though? Even though it's only by a tiny bit, it's both bending this cable probably past its comfortable bend radius, but it's also pressing on the SSD just a little bit more. Can I really not get it to sort of accordion next to the SSD? I think I did. No. If I just get a screwdriver and sort of cajole it a little bit as I'm... Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Okay, not too bad. If you just get a screwdriver and sort of push the cable sideways, it'll like create an S-curve rather than folding over the SSD. So now I can't open it up to check because that'll just cause it to unfold right away. Alright, so there's not really too much in the way of difference between the SER series and the SEi series. I mean, obviously one of these is AMD, one's Intel, but form factor-wise, the cases externally are exactly the same size, with the same exact port layout, same visa mounts, same everything. Well, except feet are different. So the differences really come down to sort of nitpicks, and I prefer this one because it has better ventilation and it's a metal case, which I feel like is just both better for just build quality, like that I could stand up to more abuse, not that you should be abusing these in any case, but it's also better for heat sinking because obviously metal, I'm assuming this is aluminum, is a much better thermal conductor than plastic. And yeah, this just has better ventilation overall, so I definitely prefer this one, all other things being equal. But otherwise, I mean, internal layout and stuff, external layout, exactly the same. Well, for the most part. Yeah, not that I can really recommend either of these, because the fact of the matter is, when it comes to computers, what you really want, maybe not above all else, but what you really want in addition to all else, is reliability. And the fact of the matter is, I don't know that that's authentic Crucial RAM, or if it is authentic Crucial RAM, has it been binned? In other words, is that RAM that's in here sort of a factory second or third? Same with the SSDs. Like, yeah, that might be an authentic Intel SSD, but Beelink might have bought it from a supplier real cheap because that supplier got it from Intel, and it was a drive that didn't pass Intel's quality control to a high enough level to sell that SSD to Dell, HP, or one of the big manufacturers, so Beelink ended up with it. So they might be authentic parts, but they might not be the highest of quality authentic parts. Then again, I could be wrong. I'm just speculating. But these two in particular were very cheap. Now granted, I got them after they were a little out of date spec-wise, but makes me a little suspicious seeing real name brand parts in there and thinking that they are... Then again, how much does a 500 gig SSD cost nowadays regardless, even from a reputable manufacturer? I mean, these 8 terabyte SSDs were expensive, but 500 gig is like nothing. And those had a lot of flash chips on them. I think the last SSD I got that was 4 terabytes had 2 flash chips, which meant each flash chip was 2 terabytes. These had 4, in one case I think 5 flash chips. So on the one with 4, that means they were 128 gig flash chips. So that's kind of outdated tech by now. So maybe they are authentic, maybe they are of quality binning, and maybe there's nothing to worry about. But only time will tell how good these are, reliability-wise, because spec-wise, they are what they are. And reliability is really the main concern. With this one, I mean, reliability is a concern, but this isn't exactly going to be a server or anything. Well, no, let me rephrase that. This is going to be a server in the sense of a Plex Media Server, but it's not going to be a mission-critical server in the sense that I need 100% uptime or thereabouts. Oh, so it's just a sticky bung covering the screws. That's kind of annoying because it doesn't... It serves an aesthetic purpose, I guess, but for whom? Like, why would you be looking at the bottom of this case for an extended period of time? So these bungs are going in the garbage. They don't help me out at all. I don't care for them. They just make it slightly more annoying to open the case. But then again, can't really be too mad about it. I mean, they're just plastic bungs. Slightly longer screws like on the other case. Oh yeah, and that's another thing I really liked about the other two, is that except for the 4 case screws on the gray unit, all the screws were exactly the same throughout, regardless of function. And that, like I said, just makes it real easy. Like, I took apart a laptop recently, and I think it had like 15 different types of screws. Okay. Again, Crucial RAM, 2 16 gig modules for a total of 32. I figured 32 should be enough for this machine. I mean, fortunately, it is easy enough to upgrade. They are DDR5. I should say the full specs, DDR5 5600, 1.1 volt SO-DIMMs. And this does not just have the motherboard, there's also a little daughter board up here for the I/O ports on the front. I guess, did they run out of room on the motherboard? Doesn't look... Well, maybe. We'll dig into that. That right away makes this a little more annoying to open up because you got to take this daughter board out, presumably before you get the motherboard out, because it overhangs the motherboard. And this is the power supply right here. See, there's the power supply connector. And it does promise me an electrical shock, which is nice. And I believe this is the heatsink for the NVMe SSDs, and this should support 2 of them, unlike the other ones. Now this one does not support a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD. Same kind of screw as the other one had throughout. Maybe a bigger head. Do I have to take all these screws out? Yeah, you got. Not even sure. And that screw has a smaller head. Okay, this one's already losing because this one has a different. It's a Phillips head, but a different size, so my other screwdriver bit wouldn't fit in it. And it's a very short and tiny screw. But I'm guessing that's holding down the SSD, maybe? Nah, heatsink unit's still being held on by yet more screws. Alright, at least that's back to sort of the same type. These are all like a bit bigger heads than the other units had in them, but they at least seem to be fairly uniform in length and size. There we go. Okay, so again, not a very generous thermal pad, but that's where one of the SSDs would sit. And this should come with one, so there should be one, I guess, under this heatsink. Ah. Oh. Ugh, that's annoying. So this NVMe connector is actually part of the heatsink module, or is attached to the heatsink module with this tiny little board. And that kind of makes taking this apart a bit more of a pain in the arse. Because I can't get to the connector for that. I could unscrew this board from the heatsink, I guess. And again, like I said, not very generous with the thermal pad. You can see there's just a pad on half of it. And again, the problem is flash chip, controller chip, and other flash chip. So that would at best only grab the controller chip and one of the flash chips. So, not a fan. And the way most SSDs work is they write across all the flash chips simultaneously. So it would still thermally throttle, right? Like one of the flash chips might be cooled, the other one would be hot, so it would thermally throttle the entire drive, rendering the heat sinking completely pointless. Of course, you can get heatsink pads separately and just add your own. Ugh. And then this screw is also much longer than all the others. It's actually the longest screw yet. Then I think there'd be another screw under this cable. And I know I could probably take off that metal clip and there's a connector under there. I just don't know what type of connector. It might be like a zebra strip type connector, and I don't want to have to worry about getting that lined up when I put it back. So I'm kind of hoping to just take this whole board out and just move it out of the way. But it's not really wanting to budge. No, there we go. Oh, it just had some sticky like foam pad there that was holding it in place. But the way this cable is bent, you can't really get this, you can't bend this out of the way completely. Alright, so what type of connector is this? Yet more types of screws and another screwdriver bit that needs to come into play here. And is that metal tab part of the connector, or yeah? Oh, okay, it's that type. I don't know the name of it, but I've seen this connector a million times before in various sizes. That's fine. At least that's easy to reattach without worrying about misaligned pins, because it does have alignment to it. And I'm going to do the same thing with the SSD connector for the top SSD. The funny thing is, after opening up those other 2 Beelink computers, this is already immeasurably disappointing. Like the other 2 were just so easy to work with, and this is already becoming like one of those nightmare laptops that you have to disconnect literally everything before you can even like do something simple like change an SSD. I mean, to be fair, you could probably change the SSD by just moving this out of the way, but I had to take out so many. This is how many screws we're up to already, and I haven't even taken the motherboard out yet. And this, oh, let's see, maybe the SSD has branding on the other side. Oh, you got to be kidding me. And then because something else screws into it, there's actually a hex nut post that's probably a screw as well, and it has a female thread in it, and probably a male thread sticking out the bottom of it. So now I actually would need a hex driver, or maybe I could just get away with a pair of needle noses. Actually, I wonder if if this screwdriver would fit over that. Nah, it's a little bigger. Damn. Kind of looked... Oh, it's very close to being the same size. But also the shaft of this screwdriver, you can see that is right next to the Ethernet ports, or the shielding around the Ethernet ports. So I think this screwdriver is just too fat to fit in there, and it's not even that fat. So if you use a hex driver, you need a really thin hex driver as well. Again, this is just to get the SSD out. Alright, these aren't exactly what you call precision screwdrivers, but I think at least one of these should fit. Maybe the smallest one. No. Shit. I have precision nut drivers somewhere. I just gotta find them. What a pain in the arse. And you can barely get your fingers in there too, because that Ethernet port shield is in the way. Maybe now that I got a little bit of it loosened out, I can get... Yeah, now I can sort of just barely fit this screwdriver on there at a weird angle. Yeah, so that is a hex head screw with a screw thread in it so you can stack SSDs, or at least screw in the heatsink above it. I mean, why? Why design it like that? Come on, guys. And then that was... The SSD was stuck to this group that is again on these connectors for the Wi-Fi module. And this is a P3 Plus M2 2280. So at least this is no-name brand. It also has a sticker that says AZW on it like the other SSDs did. Interesting. That could just be a, Beelink or their supplier. But just 2 flash chips. Again, 500 gigs, so these are 256 gig each. A little newer, I guess. This, once again, take out the Wi-Fi module because it's got 2 antenna cables coming this way into the back. So I'm just going to flip that out of the way. Oh, and that one needs a smaller screwdriver bit again. So, yeah, what I loved about the 2 cheaper devices, and these actually have like cable guides in the form of really tiny, again, these are really tiny, sort of metal clips. Looks sort of like that. And the wire just lays in that, or the cable just lays in that and gets clipped down. But they're very tiny. Alright, are we at a state where we can take the motherboard out yet? I don't think so, because there's probably another screw for the motherboard under this corner, I'm guessing, so I'm going to have to take this power supply module cover off. Ugh, and just to put a kick in the teeth, this screw is clearly not the same as this screw. Ugh, I'm going to keep these with the power supply cover, because of course that screw is different to all the other screws that I've taken out so far. And it's kind of stuck under these clips on the side of the case. Let's see, there we go. Oop, and a heatsink pad just fell off the bottom of it. So apparently there were 2 heatsink pads there and there. And these screws, they might not even be different. They might just be 2 different colors, just to add to confusion, but they have a different kind of head than the rest of them did. And that little cover was metal to presumably help with heat sinking. We got another heatsink pad under here. And so that's, I guess, the power supply module. And that heatsink pad goes through a hole in this cover. And the other heatsink was, I guess, the other heatsink pad was probably right there where this cutout is in the cover. Then we get another silver screw here and black screw there. And these appear to be the same as the ones holding that little protective cover on. Interestingly, a lot of isolation distance here around this screw, which, makes sense to have a lot of isolation distance because presumably we have 120 volt or 240 volt coming in here, but not a lot of isolation distance around this screw. Maybe that's because this one only goes into plastic, so it doesn't really matter. Oop, just lost that screw inside, but it's okay, we'll be taking this apart anyway. It's a whole module. Okay. Yeah, so there's the whole power supply module. Just your basic switch mode power supply, I'm guessing. And okay, there is a cutout in the motherboard. I didn't know that went to the full depth, and it's in its own little, like, plastic cage. So I don't think you have to remove this to get the motherboard out, but I did want to see what this is like. We got 400 volt caps, that seems good. We got another heatsink pad over here, but that would be sinking into plastic. so I don't know how valuable that is. And yeah, we got a subboard here, a little bit of three-dimensional construction. Looks like safety secondaries. So, I don't know. Just on the look of it, doesn't look like it's horrible construction. But yeah, that's the live and neutral. I don't know why they're bothering labeling it live and neutral when it's a figure of 8 lead and you can put it in either way. Yeah, that screw that didn't have much isolation distance, though, to be fair, is just going into a plastic post. But then again, so is the screw where they left a whole ton of isolation distance. But at least there's no risk of it. And these two poles that are holding up, they are metal standoffs. But that's on the secondary side, the low voltage side. So that's less of an issue, obviously. And unfortunately, not very modular because it looks like the wires are soldered onto the power connector from outside and then soldered onto the board directly. But that's live and neutral right there and there. And you can see that's the screw, and we get some other components right next to it. So again, I don't know why they went nuts with the isolation distance here but not here. Seems safe enough. I don't even see where this... Oh! Oh! Yeah, you know, I just realized I didn't see where the wiring was for the secondary. But I think these two metal posts are actually current-carrying conductors. Because there is no other connection from this power supply. What I'm going to do is, just to prevent the computer from starting up, I'm just going to maybe stick that in there so I can press down on it a little bit. Let's just plug this in and see what kind of output we get off that power supply. This lead is very thin and very flexible, by the way. Could just be a nice jacket on it that makes it very flexible, but could also be the conductors are incredibly tiny. It says 18 gauge, which is 0.824 square millimeters per conductor, but I don't know. This doesn't feel thick enough or stiff enough to be 18 gauge. But hey, I could be wrong. I've been known to be wrong in the past. Okay, so that should be powered up right now, but the computer is not. Bring in a little multimeter action, and let's see. Yeah, 19 volts. I'm going to have the polarity reversed, but that's fine. So it's the same voltage supply as the other two computers. It's just this power supply is internal. So if you did want to run this off of a DC power supply, you could just, I guess, connect a couple of leads to those two posts and then get rid of this internal power supply and then just run it out the back. And then if we change this to AC, I do believe those two pins are going to be line voltage. Yep. Ooh, very nice. Almost exactly 120 volts down here in the basement. So, yeah, those posts are current-carrying conductors. Now, are there caps in here that need to be discharged? Actually, you know what? It doesn't matter. Let's just close this up for now. Because, like I said, I think I should be able to get the motherboard out without removing the power supply anyway, after all. Oh. Yeah, I'm really not digging the construction of this one. Because you see this screw right there? Well, and this one right there. Those hold the power connector in, right? But the problem is, one of those goes into a post that's on top of the motherboard. So the power connector has to be removed in order to remove the motherboard, which just seems like a silly decision. I mean, that length of screw we've seen already in here, so that's not too bad. But this is really... I feel like because they crammed the power supply in here, they had to make a lot of other less desirable design decisions. Yeah, well, I guess since the power supply, the power connector is soldered on, I mean, we can just remove this now. Oh, I really don't like that. So, that post right there, that's what the power supply connector was attached to. That post doesn't go into anything structural. There's nothing underneath it. That post is on the motherboard PCB, which means that every time you insert or remove the power connector, which is kind of, you know, sometimes a bit frictiony, you need a bit of insertion force to get it in there or to pull it out. Every time you do that, you're putting some stress on this post, which is on the motherboard. Now, there are two slots here that the power connector actually slots into. So it is attached to the structure, it's just it can wiggle up and down freely. So as you wiggle the connector into the slot, you're actually wiggling this post that's only attached to the motherboard, and only attached to the motherboard by this tiny little section of PCB. Terrible design decision. In fact, when I put this back together, I might omit that screw completely. And this screw that goes into this hole on the other side of the power connector is actually on a plastic post that's part of the case. But, yeah, so by leaving this screw out, at least this way, any wiggling in the power connector will be, that stress will be borne by the case itself and not by the motherboard. You know, it's common, like, obviously all these other ports are supported by the motherboard. You kind of expect that, but the insertion force of this connector is generally going to be a lot higher than the insertion force and removal force of any of these other connectors. But anyway, let's see. Let's get the motherboard out. Super long screws holding in the motherboard. Well, not super long, but, you know, relatively long. I don't really know why the motherboard screws are that long. If they're just going into posts like these, the thread should be right at the surface of the post. You wouldn't really need something too much longer than the thickness of the motherboard, which is the case with these other ones. And then we have another standoff here that's actually used to keep the case lid on, and that is also holding the motherboard in. And that looks like yet a different size. Yeah, because this just fits over it and spins freely. So it's yet a different size now of hex nut driver that you need. But we'll just needle nose it. And again, since it's all the way here in the corner, it's, yeah, it's pretty hard to get my fingers around that. Now, admittedly, I'm trying to take this apart completely for YouTube, so unless you're actually removing the motherboard, you wouldn't need to remove this standoff. But even just getting to the bottom SSD was kind of annoying. Yeah, there we go. There's the standoff. So, yeah, this one's much less of a recommend than the other two. Oh, there's another one of those standoffs over here. I mean, look, I get it. They're trying to fit a lot of shit into a small box, so can't completely blame them. But I also feel like it's weird because you see there's all this blank space here in front of the motherboard. Like, why couldn't the motherboard just be that much longer? Move these connectors up to here to line up with the motherboard, and then just not have a need for this daughter board, which in surface area looks like if that daughter board was the full width of it, it would be about the same size as that gap. So this seems kind of unnecessary. And even on this one, the front button is actually held on by a screw down there and has its own metal bracket. On the other two, the button just kind of sat in there and was held in with friction, and the actual physical button behind it pressing it in. This is a better, I guess, higher quality design in that sense. But again, over-engineered, more parts than necessary. It's like they got paid by the screw. Got paid by the screw. That didn't really make sense, but I don't know. Like there was some kind of like tax advantage where they could get a write-off for each additional screw and each additional type of screw they put in this box. Oh, actually, I said it was double insulated before the power supply, but this is metal. I didn't realize that. And there was that heatsink that I made fun of going into plastic before actually did go onto this metal. So, okay, forget what I said about that earlier. It was a single layer of plastic around it with metal behind that plastic. And then what is still holding this in? Ugh, the other motherboards came out so easily. I mean, it's definitely not a screw because it's pretty free. It's like there's just something holding it in the corner. It's just the LAN port's like wedged. Oh, there we go. Yeah, the LAN port was just kind of wedged in there. There's that screw I lost in there earlier. And just as a side note, the Wi-Fi antennae are both on the top. One would be here near the front, and one would be here on the side. And that's the back we're looking at right now. And just as far as like the injection molding goes, this looks overly complicated. Like maybe they're maybe whoever designed these cases quit, and they had someone who really didn't know how to optimize the design of this stuff, and they just kind of winged it. I don't know. I especially hate designs that have these long plastic posts with no supports around them, because those just tend to break. That feels very flimsy. But anyway, Here's the motherboard. You do have to take the motherboard out, though, to replace the BIOS battery, because the BIOS battery is on the back of it. And it's also got sort of glue on it and tape on it, too. Not great. Then you can see there's all these screws on here. There's 3 screws there. Those all go into these posts. So the motherboard is also structurally supporting a bunch of stuff. Mainly the SSDs, which is fine because most motherboards do support SSDs. But yeah, I don't know. It's just such a fiddly design too, and this motherboard's like a weird shape because they had to force that power supply in here. This would be where the power supply is. And this right here is the post that I was talking about earlier that holds the power connector. So with the power supply there, the connector sits there. And you can see it goes onto that standoff, which is just attached to the motherboard and nothing else. 5 volt, 0.5 amp fan. Looks like similar or the same design as the fans in the other two. Again, heatsink fins on the back. Weirdly, there's like these superfluous heatsink fans here. And by superfluous, I mean there's no airflow over those. They're just there. Not they won't help a tiny bit, but that's really not going to help much at all. Weird. I don't know. It's just crazy to me that even though these are simpler in that they only hold one NVMe SSD at a time, but they also do hold a 2.5-inch SSD, and they are smaller form factors than this one. Their design just seems more refined, like just simple, but in a good way. Whereas this is complex and fiddly, like a badly designed laptop. Again, not that this is horrible. It's just by comparison to what Beelink's older stuff apparently looked like, this is just not as good. Alright, well, let me get this put back together, which is going to be time consuming, so I'll do that off camera. These took almost no time at all to put back together. Again, sorry to be complaining about it, but it's weird. It's just from the same manufacturer and so different. Anyway, I'm going to put this back together, and that will be the end of this video. In part 2, I'm going to load an OS onto this computer, populate it with both the 8TB SSDs, and get Plex loaded and yeah, and test it out. So thanks for watching. I've been Scott. This has been the Beelink, I already forgot what model this is, thing, and stay tuned for part 2. Bye.